Real talk today. I've discovered a serious gap in my retirement plan, and I'm very concerned that one day Medicaid might have to take my home as compensation for long-term care. Welcome and welcome back. Thank you for supporting my channel. So yes, I am very concerned that in the event I need long-term care in the future, Medicaid might have to confiscate my home as part of their estate recovery program in order to get reimbursed for any long-term care that I need. And so this video will discuss that at length and talk about some of the different options that I'm discovering. And by the way, I'm still in the process of learning. So if you have any more information for me, or if anything I say in this video doesn't sound right, please comment below. That will be very helpful. Any information that you can add. So first of all, hi, my name is Aja. I retired 2 years ago, three years ago in October of 2022 from teaching. And then I relocated last year from New Jersey to Delaware. I do not have any savings in the event that I need long-term care. So the next part of the discussion is, what is long-term care? Long-term care is defined as needing assisted living or what they call skilled care. And skilled care is what we think of as what takes place in a nursing home. Long-term care costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. And from the research I've done, 70% of people age 65 or older will at some point need some form of long-term care. And at least half of the people in this country do not have any money to afford long-term care in any form. And I'm part of that half. Women usually need long-term care for a longer period of time due to our higher life expectancies. So how would I pay for long-term care since I can't afford it? Well, I wrote down 5 standard things that happen in this situation. Ideally, I would have had enough money saved in my own personal funds and, my own savings and investments to cover long-term care so that I could choose what facilities that I would enter if I need to be in an institution such as a nursing home, and the care that I would receive. I don't have that. I currently don't have that. Another option would be to rely on family or friends. I don't want to do that. Another option would be to pay down whatever assets I do have and use the proceeds in order to buy in to what's called a continuing care retirement community. I'm not sure if that's something I really want to do, because it seems like the communities I would want to enter are not reachable for me financially. So I'm not sure about that. So another option, the big one, is to rely on Medicaid. And that's what about half of the people do. I do appreciate that this program exists, but I don't want to rely on Medicaid. And the other one, and I'm going to talk about each of these points in depth, and I'm going to start with this one, which is long-term health insurance, because it's a quick one to discuss. It's very expensive. I don't have long-term care insurance. It's more expensive for women since we do have a longer life expectancy and would probably need more funds. And often the standard life insurance, like long-term care insurance policies, don't even cover everything unless you pay a lot of money. So let me go back into some of these points that I made. So the first one, Medicaid. Let's talk about that. That's the big topic here. Here's what I found out about Medicaid. So Medicaid is an essential program. Without it, again, half the people of this country would not be able to have long-term care at all. So I do appreciate Medicaid. It can cover up to 100% of long-term care costs for those people who qualify for it. So here are the drawbacks of Medicaid. You don't have complete control over the facility that you enter and the care that you receive. There's something called Medicaid spend down. So this is for people who have high medical expenses but have a slightly higher income that would make it so that they don't qualify for regular Medicaid. But what it means is that any countable excess assets must be sold and used to cover long-term care costs before Medicaid would pay anything toward those costs. This program is state run, so in each state it might be slightly different. Here in Delaware, if I were to need in-home care, my home would be exempt. It would be considered an exempt asset and I could stay in my home. But in my case, being single, if I ever need to be institutionalized, meaning having to move to a nursing home, I would have to sell my home, my house, and use the proceeds to pay as much of my expenses as possible before Medicaid would pay anything. Now, if someone, for example, if your spouse or a dependent lives in your home, then that's fine. If you would have to enter an institution, they could continue living there. But upon your spouse's death, that's when Medicare would use something called Medicaid. Medicaid would use the Medicaid Asset Recovery Program to take your home and be compensated for the cost. And there are vouchers and exemptions to this, but if there's someone who's not a dependent who lives in your home, they might be able to stay, but then upon your death, they might have to move. So it's pretty complicated. Relying on family. By chance, I never witnessed my parents or grandparents having to care for anyone in this way. And the extended family and friends that I know of who talk about caring for their family members are usually in some type of medical profession. For example, they are nurses or some type of medical aid or something. Not everyone is capable of caring for someone in this way. For example, to give an adult a bath, you have to be physically strong and know how to lift that person up properly and so that they don't fall and you don't fall or injure yourselves. So I think it requires a level of skill that you have to either have or have to be willing to develop in order to care for someone in this way. And you also have to be strong mentally to devote the time that it would take to care for someone, out of your whatever you have going on in your life. And so I don't want to have to have a family member care for me in this way. And I don't, since I don't even live close enough to family, I can't really rely on family to take care of me for long-term care. All right, so another option would be buying into a continuing care retirement community, or CCRC. In her early 80s, I believe it was, my grandmother did that. So she sold her condo. At first, she had a house with my grandfather. When he passed away, she bought a condo, a 2-bedroom condo where she lived. And it was one of those 55 plus retirement or 55 plus communities. But at some point, I think it was in her early 80s, she decided to sell that condo to put all of her assets into an irrevocable trust and to rent a 1-bedroom apartment in a CCRC. So there were options of different levels of care within that community. My grandmother lived in an independent living unit, which meant that she had her own kitchen so she could make her daily coffee and whatever meals that she might want to make. But she also had access to daily meals cooked for her and cleaning services. And she became active by joining the community newsletter and writing for it and joining art classes. She also had access to transportation through a shuttle. So she would get transportation to church, and there was a supermarket right across the street from her community. So overall, it seemed to be a good choice for my grandmother. If at some point she had needed assisted living or skilled care, there were units built into that community that she could have moved to receive that care. I really don't know all of the details of my grandmother's finances. I'm still starting to learn little by little of what her situation was. But I recently learned that she did, in fact, use Medicare in addition to her personal funds to pay for this facility, and that because she had the irrevocable trust, her assets were protected and she was able to leave an inheritance. Now, the drawbacks of living in a CCRC. Once my grandmother put her assets into that irrevocable trust, she was no longer the owner of those assets and had no control over those assets anymore. And she would have had to create that trust at least 5 years before applying for Medicaid in order for her assets to not be counted as excess assets. When I talked with when I talked with my grandmother about her living conditions, she would always complain about nosy and mean neighbors. And there was even this creepy guy who would keep flirting with her. And she would complain about seeing death regularly. And that could be depressing sometimes. You know, it was kind of like, okay, this is a place where people come to die. So I'm still not sure about the CCRC as an option. I would love to be able to stay in this house and receive in-home care here. That would be great. Hopefully, hopefully I won't need long-term care at all, but if I do need it, hopefully it will be in-home care that I could pay with part of whatever savings I have and supplement with Medicaid. All right, so my conclusions. What am I going to do about this situation? First of all, I want to talk with an elder law attorney in 2026. I read about this in one of my books that I've been reading about personal finance. So there's something called an elder law attorney who might be able to help me to set up my estate plan and um, possibly give me some advice on whether I should continue with my goal of paying off my home early, or instead focus on saving and investing toward a long-term care fund. I'm thinking that if I can pay at least some of the initial cost of long-term care, at least I would get to choose my own facilities and the type of care that I would receive before applying for Medicaid. Another thing that I'm going to do is to keep working on my relationships with family, especially my children. Both have expressed a desire to care for me, which is wonderful. And I so appreciate that. But I always tell them, look, I will take anything you offer, but I don't want to depend on you for my care. You have your own family, your own life, and I want you to focus on that. So I don't want to depend on my children for my long-term care. But either way, I will need them to be involved in my care. I would need them to regularly check on me and make sure that I'm receiving the care, proper care that I need. Also, regarding family, I don't want to depend on an inheritance or assume that I'm getting an inheritance. First of all, I want my elders to live for as long as possible. And now, with the way that life expectancies have increased, that is more and more possible. So the reality is, I might need long-term care at the same time that my elders do. I might need it before receiving any inheritance. So no, I do not want to depend on a possible inheritance to pay for my long-term care. Well, I realize that I might end up losing my assets in one way or another in order to pay for long-term care because I don't have the savings or the insurance at this point. And I've come to terms with that. I accept that. However, from this point forward, I will do everything in my power to make sure that I can have as much control over my future as possible. So if I ever need long-term care, I want to know all of the options available to me as far as what facilities and what type of care that I will receive. So I'm going to continue researching and studying this topic. Again, if you have any information to provide me, any resources you recommend, please comment below. I will appreciate that so much. And I wrote down a list of 5 things that I can control. The first 3 are about keeping healthy so that maybe I can be part of that 30% of people who don't ever need long-term care. And that would be, I can stay active. I can control what I eat. I can visit the doctor and dentist regularly. And then the other 2 are more about being proactive. I can continue to seek employment and ways to increase my income, and I can continue to research all of my options. Well, I hope that this video was helpful to you. If so, please give it a like. Please consider subscribing so you can continue following my early retirement journey as it unfolds. Please share this video with anyone else who might find it useful, and bookmark it for later in your own playlist if this is a topic that you might want to revisit. Thank you, stay inspired, and keep thriving.